Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scouser podcast. As you can see, you are down to, Plan B and Plan C this week, as our fearless leader, Timuchin, is taking his beautiful family on vacation to the Outer Banks, which, as any of us who have heard the stories know, that there is some good old-fashioned shenanigans that go down when that family gets together on the Outer Banks. So we will miss Timuchin this week, but we will live vicariously through him, where we start the program like we start every program. Who the hell am I kidding? We are not starting this goddamn program with trivia. But we will start, like we normally do, with a quick hello to Brian Shelton. Hello, Brian. How are you today? I hope everything is going well and things are good for you as well. But Paul, I guess I will start with a quick trivia question. And it's not even a trivia question about Liverpool Football Club. This is more one from your expertise. Knowing what you learned about what that vacation was like in the Outer Banks, what are the odds that young little Leo, adding a second animal into the mix, rolling down there with the Urises, might have added to the amount of unnecessary drama in Foreseen Home?
Listen, Timuchin can run from this podcast and he can run from hanging out with us, but there's no escaping the unnecessary pet drama that happens in the Outer Banks.
Exactly. So you're saying that seeing that you are a betting man, your bet would be that there is an increased volume of drama by adding a second puppy into the mix.
Absolutely, because Leo doesn't know what's coming.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I think Leo thinks like life is just following Stitch and sniffing where Stitch lays things down, and just knowing your role. And he's about to learn there is a whole nother hierarchy when it comes to the vacation roles of said pets.
Yeah. My favorite thing about that trip is that they go like what? It's got to be like at least 15 to 18 hours to get to the Outer Banks. For those of you that don't know, the Outer Banks in North Carolina are a series of barrier islands that are on the eastern seabank. And I can literally see them from my house, but it takes me like 3.5 hours to get to because of the way the coast is. You have to drive 2 hours inland and then drive 2 hours back out. So they're a bit isolated. But Dimitri is the only one that will spend that amount of time and energy to get to the beach, only to not go to the beach. Like, hey Tim, you wanna walk down to the ocean? He's like, nah, dude. He's like in his like little like inner tube in the pool, like paddling around. But he's cool with the pool, and he'll just wave at the ocean. But he has no desire to go down to the ocean. So
that is actually fitting and quite funny. It also means that he's already started to lie to me and use excuses that he's on vacation because I asked for a little assistance, and he told me I'm at the beach. And you just basically blew up his spot that he has never been to the beach at the Outer Banks.
No, he's in a $9 he's in a $9 inflatable raft that he bought from one of those like surf shacks on the way in, just like in the pool, probably with a drink on his chest. I can't blame him.
Amazing stuff. Well, what a segue, right? If we're going to talk about the $9 raft, we might as well talk about the quality official Liverpool home kit that we have purchased at American Scouser to raffle off to one of you lucky subscribers. Unfortunately, if you're already a subscriber to this program, well, we owe you a lot of apologies because you tune in each and every week. But we appreciate the time and your commitment to our channel. If you have not subscribed, I'm going to drop that link to our YouTube page in the chat right now. Go ahead. Get yourself subscribed. Click the link, subscribe. We will be running a report, bringing on all new subscribers and then randomly selecting a winner, at which point we will reach out to verify your size, the kit, and then we will get that home jersey sent your way. Our goal is to run a lot more content in the 23-24 season, running through our YouTube channel. It's not just going to be specific to Liverpool, but we promise the majority of the content will be Liverpool related, but we're going to try to do supporters club groups. We're going to try to do some watch alongs. We're even going to try to get some coverage of the women's side coming up next year, as well as all the great content we're doing now, the Monday, Thursday podcast, the fantasy show. So we really hope to grow these numbers. So please go ahead and subscribe to the channel today. And who knows, maybe you can win yourself a fabulous prize. Well, speaking of fabulous prizes, right? We've started the summer off, Paul, with an actual signing. We can actually talk about a new footballer that we have seen do the Liverpool lean. Let's not go into the shirt number situation. I thought that was the best initial drama. How upset is the rest of the side going to be? They gave him number 10. He's never played a match. He doesn't even wear 10 for Brighton. Unbelievable the things we can get ourselves twisted in as Liverpool supporters. But I found this little ditty, which I'm not going to lie, I purely wanted a reason to put up a strung out and Diego Maradona and our newest midfielder. This is a picture actually of Alexis McAllister, his father, Carlos Javier McAllister, who was a teammate of Diego Maradona's, and the legend himself. I just love the fact that you could argue that there is a good chance that, well, any two of the three people in this picture could be high on cocaine in this picture when you look at their eyes. But could you imagine having that man as your father? I mean, we're only getting one of his eyes, and you can tell that that McAllister guy took absolutely zero shits.
Well, right, and then being so well ingrained in the footballing community in Argentina and being whiter than I am is amazing in and of itself. Like, what you need is a red-haired McAllister running around who's Argentinian, not Irish or Scottish.
I think my favorite part is that the left, there are two other sons in these photos, two other brothers, one of which is Kevin McAllister, which I just like to believe someone just screamed out Kevin at every impasse, like every time they went on vacation. Because it is great when you have an Irishman that represents Argentina as a World Cup winner. But hey, at least an Irishman can stake claim to winning the World Cup. But
now you're gonna get them all riled up.
Got them all riled up.
Macca piling in. Jamie's gonna pile in.
We'll figure out where that one goes from there. But hey, you know what? The point of that conversation was it was a funny little dig, but also I think it's important because I think the way and how this player fits in will have a lot to do with where the next iteration of this midfield goes. I don't think there's a surprise, in my opinion, that he was the first shoe to drop because he can arguably play in all three of the midfield positions we have today. And if we shift formations, he can play in two other midfield positions that are out there. Like, he's a genuine Swiss Army knife. And I think that's why some Liverpool supporters are struggling a little bit with the idea that this was the focus. But for me, I feel like this piece being the first piece allows you to broaden what you do in the market, which is where I really give Ward credit. And I'm saying Ward on purpose because this transfer only happens because Ward started laying the foundation when he was still in the job, probably last summer through January, right? So when we talk about McAllister, Paul, I'd like to focus here on starting with these three. And we're going to have this conversation from the point that we don't have any other midfielders yet, right? With McAllister in the fold, let's start with the captain in the middle. How do you feel this actually affects Jordan Henderson from kind of to start this transition? We're going to talk about each of these three kind of at a high level here, but starting with the captain himself. Do you think this transfer has much of a bearing on the minutes he plays and or his role in the side next season?
Well, I think any transfer should a little bit because I think we are trying to start this transition into the next James Milner role, right?
Yep.
Like, I mean, that's what we should be seeing. So I definitely think it impacts him a little. But like you said, I think the McAllister transfer impacts all of them. And I think that's why it makes sense because it doesn't narrow what you do in the transfer market moving forward.
Yeah, let's move over to Thiago because I was down on Thiago this year. I've been down on Thiago for about a year and a half now. His injury record is difficult. There's little end product actually in his game when it comes to actually seeing how he impacts when you look at chances created, goals scored. And these aren't specific that he's there. It's specific to when he's on the pitch, actually. We score less goals when Thiago plays, which shouldn't be the case, but it has been since he came here. Do you think that in a perfect world, McAllister slots in and becomes the starter on the left-hand side of our midfield three?
Yes. Yep, I do. I think that's the thing that makes the most sense, especially when you look at some of the other players that we're looking at in the midfield who have played a lot more minutes on that right side. So I think it does mostly impact the left side of this thing. And you're right. I mean, I think Thiago slows play down. We always thought he was purchased to be a plan B, right? To be somebody that we brought in the last 20 minutes of a game when we were struggling to break down a low block. And so I think the fact that we were relying on him as our third best midfielder and the starting three essentially was never the original plan. So to have somebody sort of naturally seed over into something that we haven't seen since Genie is important. And I think it's important to also note that, like, for all we know, intents and purposes and what we've seen with McAllister, extremely durable. And that's something that, obviously aside from the depth and the ability to play all positions is important.
So let's focus here a little bit. And we have done our time on Jones on this podcast over the last month. I'd say we've spent more time since April 1st talking about Curtis Jones than probably any other point combined on all of our podcasts, other than the times where we complained and said he wasn't good enough for the club. Which I'll raise my hand and say I pounded that drum for a good year plus. And I will say I've come full circle on that. I'm not saying, Jones saves us from spending $60 million. And if there was a chance to get Mason Mount, I'd still tell you to go sign Mason Mount because I know as a finished article what he is. And if Jones hits his highest point, he might get to Mason Mount's level, to be honest. What I loved about Jones was I saw a maturity in his decision-making on the pitch, which was always something that I criticized him for. And the people in our Discord and other places that would argue that point to me would always say, well, you got to give the kid a run of games to show you whether or not he fits in. And I'd always say, well, is he actually good enough to get those run of games? I feel like he earned that run of games. And I'd argue since Genie left, it might have been the best run of 10 consecutive games we had by any player in our engine room of the midfield. And that even includes Henderson, because as we've seen, he'll have his high highs, then he'll have some lows. Jones was good breaking forward, getting in the box, creating. But I felt like his defensive work and his communication with both his wingers and Robertson behind him, he just looked like he finally had matured enough that he wasn't trying to go 100 miles an hour. Was I blinded by the Scouse talent? Was I just excited to see a really quality player for a short period, Paul? Like, talk me off the fence here, because I am about to build the guy a statue, and, well, this is me, and that's not normally my style.
I mean, well, let's face it. Like, he not only did he have a run at an incredible 10-game stretch, but over half of that run, he was the best guy on the side, which is not something anybody saw coming. So I think he's deserved the ability to get the minutes. I don't know that I ever want to see him at CDM, but I think what a player like McAllister does in this situation is it allows you to look at these players on the screen, right? And let's just imagine Thiago is either injured or not somebody you want playing a full 90 minutes. And let's imagine Henderson's played on a Thursday night in some Eastern European block in Europa Cup, and you're turning around and playing another game on Sunday. And I think the ability to have a player like Jones competing at the level that he was competing down the stretch allows you to plug him in and have McAllister flop over to the right side with Fabinho behind and immediately have a better midfield than we saw the entirety of this year. And that's without adding any other additional midfielder.
Yeah, I got to agree there. I've really kind of I've come around with it. I think what he adds is a guy like Jones with McAllister. He gives you depth, and depth in a way that isn't just like, hey, we have a sub now for this player, or we can go to Bashetic, etc. I feel like they actually have the ability to make a move should they have to. Brian Shelton says, I'm good with Jones in that role. I think he's talking about what you were saying, Paul, kind of being that utility knife, maybe the fourth option. I think if Jones is your fourth or fifth option, you're doing really, really well for yourself. As we've talked about in the past, where Henderson goes and who we sign to start on the right-hand side is going to be a big, big key. So we've talked a little bit about the Thiago and Henderson pieces. We've touched on this, and I used this graphic deliberately because at the time that we shared this graphic, it was a really, really shocking piece that Harvey Elliott was the only Liverpool player to appear in all 36 fixtures across all competitions at that point in the season, one more than even Mo Salah. I think we jinxed the little son of a bitch because we posted this thing, and he made, I think, 4 appearances the rest of the way, to the point where he really wasn't even making the bench. So I'll pose this one to you, Paul, and you can bring to a lesser extent Fabio Carvalho into this if you choose, right? Is this the beginning of the end for these players at this club, with the idea that you have Trent's role switching, which kind of creates a bigger responsibility on members of the midfield? And do you think in some way that Trent has fallen, or that Harvey has fallen to a point, not out of favor with the club or the manager, but purely out of a tactical position in this setup?
Yeah, I mean, I do. And I think it's crazy, the fall of Harvey with the rise of Jones, how those sort of mirror each other in the plot lines. It's in a weird, almost David Fisher-like way. It's just very strange to see that sort of career trajectory mirrored like that in opposite ways. I do think, the rise of Jones really does coincide with the fall of Harvey, because that really came along with a tactical switch where we started seeing essentially Trent playing as that inverted fullback. I think it changes the way that midfield plays when he essentially becomes a double pivot. And I think it changes the way that whole entire right side operates. And I think, Harvey is in that sync. For me, Harvey is in that wheelhouse with Carvalho, where these players that are quick twitch, creative, good vision players that don't have the pace or physicality to play up top and are probably too technically good offensively to sit there and try to be a box to box in a Premier League that bangs, with the best of them. It just doesn't make sense in terms of their physical makeup and their style. I think both of those players are like players that have generational type talent, like ceilings, that are in a system that doesn't make sense for them tactically.
Brian Shelton writes, the tactical shift really changed the role of the midfield. I'd like to see Harvey out on the right. And we've had this conversation, right? Like, does this move Harvey further forward? Is Harvey who the club ultimately sees as that cover for Mo? And anytime we've come back to it, is we just question whether he has the pace that's required to play in our formation or our setup. Now, that said, could there be a different iteration of this if Trent is moved more into a full-time midfield role? And would you need that same pace? We're surely not going to not utilize Mo's pace and he's on the pitch, because it's one of his number one attributes. So to me, that pace argument never changes. I just question where Harvey's positioning is in this side, because it felt to me like we were shoehorning him into being Henderson's replacement on the right-hand side of the midfield. And now it feels like we're going out to buy multiple options to play there. And more importantly, tactically, the way Harvey plays, I don't think you can have Harvey and Trent roaming around the midfield together at the same time, because now you have two players who aren't trying to defend anywhere on the pitch. So I really struggle with Harvey, and it kills me because he's such a likable young kid. He seems like he's got such a good head on his shoulders, and he absolutely loves playing for this club. That doesn't mean you get to play for this club, though. And I'm starting to wonder if he ends up being the one where when the music finishes, if he's one of the guys without a chair.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I think if we've seen this, right? I really think that Carvalho and Harvey are both lesser extremes of Coutinho in terms of like trying to find their role in this system that plays to their strengths. Obviously, Coutinho is such a good enough player that you can almost restructure a system around him. But at the end of the day, if you remember before we sold him, Klopp was struggling to figure out where to play him. We were moving him around. We had him out on the left wing. I think we've seen this story before, and we know how it ends. But that is tough, especially for players like Carvalho that we were convinced, had the ability to play possibly in the 9 and make some noise there. And then a player like Harvey, who's got such a fantastic personal story about growing up as a boyhood supporter and seeing that dream come true the way he did at the age he did, and having some of the big moments he did before the big injury. So yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow, but I mean, I think at the end of the day, this game's business, and we can be sentimental as supporters, but successful businesses aren't.
Yeah, and we're going to dovetail into some of the some of the rumors out there, some of the transfers in, some of the recent rumors that came out this week. There was a lot of chatter on the defensive side this week, which is really intriguing to me because I do think there needs to be some defensive reinforcements. But some of the names we're being linked to, and not just linked to, we're being linked to by quality reporting, in the know reporters saying we might be in on these guys, which normally they're the guys who get it fed by the club who want said bid to come in. Kind of shocked me a little bit. And it started to make me think, do you think there's a chance, and I've been saying for years this would never happen, so this will just be, Gally being wrong one more time. Do you think there's a chance that Klopp actually sees moving Trent into midfield next year as an actual midfielder and not playing with the inverted?
I mean, I guess it's possible. I don't see it. I don't see it because I think unlike City's version of this that they're doing with John Stones, I think unlike that version, this team transitioning out of a back 4 while out of possession and into a back 3 in possession, I think allows Henderson to be out there and do well, and then sort of protects the weak parts of his game. And I think essentially allowing that to happen still allows Trent to be in a deep line playmaking position to do those things and then move in the central areas while not having to be as reliant on that underlap from Henderson and having that extra protection of Konate sliding over. And then I think in front of Van Dijk, it adds extra protection because you essentially have a double pivot in front of those 2 center backs. So I think it takes some things in aging players and makes them immediately safer and better in just one move. So I have a hard time seeing us moving to a static back 3, especially when you have the likes of Rabo, who I know is aging and started to look a little bit more comfortable in it, but still don't think it plays to his strengths.
Yeah, that's been my biggest one. I mean, honestly, if you told me Trent was, if you told me Trent was moving into midfield, I'd question whether or not they weren't thinking about cashing in on Robertson, maybe to get a price, get a fee, and actually go to a back 3 with 3 dedicated center backs that fit the system, and then moving things around where Trent plays more in this midfield 5. I don't know that I see it in the current. I personally am like you. I think we'll actually have Trent at right back, and then when we're in possession, he'll go forward. But I do kind of see where Jamie Carragher made some really good points at the end of the season. He was like, look, ultimately at some point, this whole team has to be built around their best player. And what we saw those last 10 matches is as good as Mo is, as good as Darwin can be and Gakpo can be, when Trent is on his game going forward, everything good happens through him. A few of the passes he had and the space he created and the areas of the pitch he was taking up, you could just see what a brilliant attacking force he could become. And ultimately, why then wouldn't you at least consider for the long term of the kid's future, if this is where you're going to play him the majority of games and have him give you the most impact, now would be the time, or over the next season or two. And I don't know that there's a player out there right now. Who knows? Maybe if Ramsey had come last year and came good and looked like he was a player, we'd feel more confident with that. So we're going to jump off there. I just want to remind everyone, we do have our, let me pull this out here. I don't know why that was coming up that way. We do have our Discord channel that is going all the time. Please get in there. We would love to have you join the channel. Talk to us. I'll put a link in. There's all kinds of conversations that are happening on a daily basis. As some people say, some good, some stupid, some, well, people just have great ideas they want to kick around. And then everyone just dumps on those ideas all day long. But it's a lot of fun. We have a good time and we genuinely enjoy it. And if you are a person who watches matches alone, honestly, this is a great way to stop that, because if you're in this Discord and you got your phone with you, you have an ongoing, you're basically in the pub all day long. So it's kind of it's a fun one. So I hope that some of you take us up on it. Join the Discord channel. We'll continue to talk about it. So we've been talking a lot about the real deal bullshit meter here at American Scouser. So Paul, we're going to look at some of those. I'm going to bring up a slide here in a moment with some of these defensive players that we've been linked to recently. I want to start there because I do think it's important that we sign at least one center back or defensive reinforcement this offseason. Left to right here, we have the young Timbers. We have young Leroy Caldwell. Obviously, Benjamin Pavard, a World Cup winner and starter for France. We have Mickey Van de Ven. It took me a week, and I figured out how to pronounce 7 different V's, all lowercase. Someone explained that to me. And one that I'm a little bit probably more intrigued with, the rumors only started to circulate recently, is that we might be interested in the English center back, Mark Guy from Crystal Palace, which I'd argue that he was one of the most impressive players I saw all last season at a team outside of the top 6. I thought he was like Crystal Palace's best player at many times. I know he got a sniff up into the English setup. This feels like it's an agent doing a job, just linking him with Liverpool. But I thought that was an interesting one. Take price and how hard it would be to get them out of their club, right? Out of the equation. If I'm giving you one of these players, which one are you signing? And if I'm telling you you can have one for the long haul for the future, does it change the player that you go by?
No, because my number one pick isn't up here. No, it doesn't, because I think out of all the players on here, I'm probably going Levi Cole. Who's a Chelsea Academy kid, right?
Yep.
He's still at Chelsea, right? Brighton was a loan.
Yeah, it was a 1-year loan. He goes back to Chelsea. There are a lot of rumors that, Pochettino's in love with him and wants him to be a big part of the project moving forward. There's other rumors that he wants out because he just got first team football and he doesn't want to be part of that train wreck. So it'll be an interesting one there. It's always difficult dealing with Chelsea. It's one thing buying one of their dregs. I don't know if you buy one of the actual players the new manager wants.
That's what I was saying. I mean, that's who I like of those lot the most for like an acquisition piece. I just think when you consider that it's Chelsea that has him, like, it probably makes it very unlikely. He is a left-footed center back, though, and we know that's what we found out today. Specifically, that's what we're looking for. Which brings up a lot of other things in terms of how that's going to fit. Timber's a nice player. He's more of a right-sided player, though, and he's predominantly right-footed. So I just don't think he's – I also haven't heard enough smoke about him. Most of the interest I've heard is come from the Manchester side. So I don't think – look, everyone's talking Pavard for right back and move Trent to midfield. I don't like him as a right back for us. But he makes sense if you want an impact player and you are going to a permanent back three. That might make sense. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I know it's not going to happen from a price standpoint. My favorite's probably always going to be Gvardiol, and I'll stand behind that until he gets permanently snapped up by Manchester City.
It's what it sounds like is happening, and unfortunately, it sounds like it could happen as soon as this summer. This is what they do, right? They spend their money wisely. They sell their players high, and then they turn around and they buy quality players that reinforce. And, he'll go there. He'll play for a season. He'll be a starter. He'll probably win player of the year. And then the next year they'll decide to let a journeyman from Bournemouth beat him out for his job like they did to Diaz with Ake this year. And it took 9 months for Diaz to get back on the pitch. But now he's back and he's, the number one guy. It's what they do. It'll be interesting there. It does sound to me like the Pavard thing has some legs, but I'm with you. He's a right-sided center back. And he's made it clear he doesn't want to go somewhere and play right back. He wants to be back to his position as center back. Could he be actual cover for Konate from the plain fact that Konate has proven that staying fit is an issue that we have to worry about? Maybe, but even 35, 40 million, when you already have Matip and Gomez, under that rationale, you'd be selling both and buying two. So the one that, Per Schurz, the Torino fullback or center back, he's a left-footed center back. We've been linked to him in the past. That's another one. He's not on the screen, but that would be something that would be a little bit intriguing to me. But it sounds like this Mickey Van de Veen is also a very highly touted young left-footed center back with a big, big upside. And they may feel like he's the type of player they could bring in. To me, maybe that means you're keeping Gomez. I just don't see Gomez, Matip, and a new center back coming in personally. But they are planning to sell, Phillips if they can. So you're probably going to need a fifth center back. So we talked here about the incoming possible defenders. So we've talked an awful lot about some of these midfielders. Obviously with, left to right here, we have Manu Kone, Nicola Barella, and Kefrim Thuram. Thuram sounds like there's the most fire and smoke behind it, obviously with the personal terms, and it sounds like the player is very much in favor. I saw one of the betting sites put out odds on his next club, and it was basically 6-1 to PSG as the second and 4-6 that he'd end up at Liverpool. So when you start to see odds that short, you start to think the bookmakers know more or might be getting tipped that. If I gave you a blank check, you could sign any two of these. Which two are you signing?
Thuram and Barella. I think Barella's the least likely to join. It just doesn't make sense as to why he'd want to come from Champions League runner-up to us out of the Champions League. Players that are in their prime, that are studs and that are established in the Serie A generally do not leave the Serie A. So I like all three, honestly. I think Thuram's more the blueprint that Klopp looks for. Bigger, kind of rangy, tall lad. I think the fact that PSG's in the mix actually helps us because Nice do not want to sell. They're only selling because the player has basically told them that he is on the way out and would like to out, and they're going to honor it. But I will tell you that Nice has already made it very clear that they're going to be very difficult over the price. We know it's going to be under the initial release cost of 50 million, but it's just going to end up it's going to come down to what do we consider value enough to go for the player. I think why PSG helps us is if it's between us and PSG, they're not going to intentionally look like. I have a hard time seeing a situation where even as PSG overbids and outbids us on the player, that they would want to basically essentially load PSG with more talent in their own league. Like, to me, if it's even close, I'm going out of league so I don't have to worry about offloading my best players to PSG and being a feeder for them. So it'll be interesting. I know Nice is probably going to want to play tough, hardball. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it could be one of those ones, and I hate this situation. We've talked about it before. Like, if you really want to move as a player, you do have the control. You just have to do the thing no player wants to do, which is, hand in the written formal transfer request, which not only is going to, hurt you in your negotiation rights, it's going to hurt you in the bonuses, and it hurts you in the fees that you get and your agents get. But, no player wants to leave, especially a club they've been at for a long time as a youth player, and leave with the idea of asking to leave. Like, it's easy for everyone to say, well, if the player really wants to go, he's just got to hand in a transfer request. And it's like, he also basically takes a big fat fucking flamethrower to his memory and his history at the club. Like, we see these guys fight themselves from celebrating after they score like clinching match-winning goals against opponents that they were on loan at for 3 months because they got a standing ovation on, or they treated their mom nice on mom and daughter day, and then we just want these young kids. So I hate asking that, but it might come to that. Like, if this kid really sees a dream move to Liverpool and, doesn't want to be Naby Fekir and literally end up never making the moves you want and kind of like toiling on for a year or two more, because that's what happens when players don't make moves. We've talked about it before, right? Like, there's a reason, though, that this kid has been described as like all of the good that Paul Pogba brings. He's tall, he's skillful, he's both tactically skilled on the ball, with the ball, but he's also powerful out of possession. He's a force in the air. I mean, he's going to start for, I believe, the favorite or the second betting favorite at the under-21 European Championships, and he's going to be a big, big key for France. And if I'm looking around the world, and I'm Liverpool, a club who loves to acquire young talent, right? I'm starting at the clubs that are producing the best international players and being like, you're competing with Tchouaméni and you're competing with, all these other midfielders in France for positions, and you're holding your own enough to make that. I really believe that the Thuram kid, for me, should be the 1A signing. As far as Barella, I couldn't agree with you more. Barella's not leaving Italy. An Italian player in their prime, an Italian international in their prime, is only leaving that league because they're at a club that won't sell them to another Italian club, which most Italian clubs will, or because they're sick of being paid undervalue. Now, that's where, a guy like Chiesa or a guy like Barella might say to themselves, hey, I can go to the Premier League for 4 or 5 years, and I can make what I would make in the next 10 years in Serie A. But there's no guarantees here. And there's a guarantee for Barella to start every single week in Italy. And honestly, if he wants to leave Inter, he could force himself to Napoli or AC Milan or Juventus, because they literally change jerseys the way people change underwear. Like, I mean, I think Dzeko has played for every single team and side in Serie A since leaving Manchester City. And all the guy does is continue to score goals. Before we get to talking about that train wreck of a final for a little bit, let's go back to the bullshit meter. And I want to talk about a couple of the actual players in the side. And let's start with young Calvin Ramsey. I like to use this graphic because I like to remind myself that Calvin Ramsey is a real person and does play for Liverpool Football Club. Tough kid, tough injury, obviously. Reports are he's basically almost ready to be back to full training. There's reports out there of Preston pushing hard for a season-long loan. One, are you sending him out on loan? And two, would you be trying to find him a home in the Premier League rather than the Championship?
Like home as in loan?
Yes, they're right. If you were going to loan him out, if your answer is yes, you think a loan is in the best interest for him in the club,
Gotcha.
would you be targeting a Championship side, or would you be looking to get him at the Premier League level so you can actually start to see him against the level of competition you purchased the player to play against?
This is such a difficult question because there's so many different factors here. Like, right, like, do we end up getting a center back in the market, one that can play right-sided? Are we going to go with a back three? Are we going to be with a static back four? There's so many factors here. I'll say that if we play with a static back four next year, I would absolutely keep him at the club and have him training with the first team. If you believe in what we heard before was that this kid had real deal potential and could be a special fullback. So if all that tracks and if he is in the ball game and playing at the level he was before, I absolutely keep him at the club. If you're going to go to a back three, or if you acquire if you go out in the transfer market and acquire a fullback, then I'm putting him in the Championship and I'm putting him with the team with that is going to play him every single match he's available.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I was just wondering, I've heard, we know that Preston has good ties with us from, Sepp's loan in the past and other players that we've loaned out. We know that we like that their formation. We like the way that they train. And I do believe he'll play there. They seem like they're really, really interested to him. I wouldn't be sending him to, say, Leicester City, a club that is going to try their hardest to come right back up and probably play Premier League level players, just assuming, well, one, they're going to have to pay them. So I think that's part of it. And two, I don't think I would do that. So one loan for a young right-footed defensive player, and you're all for it. What are you doing with this kid, Paul?
God, and I was just going to say, there's Connor Bradley, who just had an outstanding year in the Championship for Blackburn. So it's like you've got options at right back here. There just seems to be a gulf between what's available and the current standard for the starting 11. That just seems to be there. I love Sepp. I think that if you're selling that, I'm keeping Sepp in the picture. And Sepp has the ability to play in a back three. He can play in a traditional back four as either a center back or a fullback. And we've seen him essentially as a midfielder, as a really advanced right wing back at his loan in Preston right before he moved to Schalke and then had the crazy injury. So he's coming back from a really, really bad injury. Of course, scores his first game back. So I still like him. I know that when we bought him, there was a lot of hype about he was going to be the next big thing. And a lot of people don't think he panned out. But a lot of people don't realize how raw he was when we bought him and how young he was when we bought him. So he's got time on his side. I would love to see him in the picture.
Yeah, I'm with you. And there's a little bit of a caveat to it too, right? Like, people don't realize this, we all, in our Discord channel that I mentioned earlier, right? Everybody's got their roles. And there's people you can ask a funny joke to. There's people you can ask how to smoke meat, Brian Shelton. People you can ask about alcohol, right? Everybody's got something. Megan handles our homegrown numbers and rule-based items. You ask me to explain the whole homegrown numbers thing, and I will screw it up over and over. But I know this. It stops you from signing European-level talent. It stops you from registering senior squad members that are purchased from overseas. This kid qualifies as a homegrown player this season because he has been at the club for more than 5 seasons and came as a teenager. For me, that's a no-brainer. You bring this guy back in. He's your 5th center back. He's your 2nd or 3rd right back on the depth chart, maybe even behind Gomez, or you buy one. And to your point, Paul, it allows you to send Ramsey out, figure out what you have there, and play this kid for another year and figure out a little bit of what you have. Because I've seen a player in what I've seen so far that could be every bit a member of this squad that Costas is, right? Like it took Costas a year and he found himself a small role. And I'd even argue it took a second year for that role to regress to the point that it's not much of a role anymore, but he still fills a void in the building. And clearly, I think it would help this young man to train every day with the first team setup. And who knows, maybe he becomes your center back of the future. Maybe he becomes a squad player, or maybe you raise his value to the point that you can sell him for an actual fee and not one of these, Awani fees where we get $8 million from Union Berlin for a guy we never gave a shot to play after 4 years of saying all we need is a big body striker to come in and give us an alternate option. And then he goes to Forest for $30 million and scores the 5 goals that keep them up down the stretch because he's a big ass body striker who proved he can score in the Premier League against Premier League defenders.
He was arguably the best striker in the Premier League the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. And he was all over the place, and he showed that he's an all-around footballer. So I would definitely agree. I would keep Sepp here. So before we jump off Liverpool, spend the last 15 minutes kind of talking a little bit about the Champions League final, Manchester City's win, and more importantly, kind of European transfers as a whole. Any other quick hits, bullets, things you've seen in the news regarding Liverpool this week, Paul, that you want to bring up? I mean, I think we did a pretty good job of hitting on most of them.
Yeah, I will say the rumor that popped up today about Vega, the kid at Celta Vigo, that is a really interesting one. Because if we missed, we talked about, you and I kind of fanboyed out about the Mason Mount potential transfer and what that would mean for this club to have a naturally right-sided midfielder who can also act as a naturally right-sided attacker. This kid is that. He has been utilized and plays in a very, very similar way to Mason Mount. He's fundamentally locked into a midfield 4, but he loves to get forward. He also loves to drift into that wide channel, very similar to how Darwin does on the left side. He does that from a midfield perspective on that side. It's a really, really interesting rumor. I don't think it will happen just based on we don't usually get young talent out of La Liga going into the Premier League at that level, but it's a very interesting one to kind of keep an eye on.
Well, I know this. The last time Liverpool dipped into the Spanish market for a teenager who brought a midfielder in with all kinds of potential, we let him play about 8 appearances, Luis Alberto. We then sent him to Spain, let him go on loan, and he's been ripping it up in Lazio ever since. And I don't know if he would have ever made it work in the Premier League. But do you want to talk about, of that 8-man transfer window where we spent all the Luis Suarez money on anything of shine or object, there's no question that the greatest success of any player purchased during that transfer window was Luis Alberto's career. The problem was Brandon Rodgers let him play 3 times and deemed him as surplus to requirements. But let's be fair, he also tried to send Jordan Henderson out for Clint Dempsey once. So there is that. Well, so we're not going to talk a ton about this from a tactical masterclass, but really I just wanted to get both these pictures on one goddamn slide. What really is the irony behind Pep? Did Pep win it, or did Lukaku lose it?
Oh God. I mean, there's some irony because I thought Pep overthought the lineup. I thought that Kyle Walker not in there was a weird fucking move. And I think it kind of played out that way throughout the game. Look, you're not going to play City and dominate possession, right? The best you can hope for is to get in there that 60-40 area. I thought Inter did a good job of not trying to necessarily control possession, but they had the lion's share of a dangerous counterattacking spots, which is exactly how you're going to beat City. So look, that whole match was lining up for an Inter goal. And you know what? Credit to City. They just continually sort of applied pressure. They got a chance. They took it. It was an incredible strike. It was a good shot, but it was just, it didn't fall that way. Lukaku, gosh, he comes on, right? He skies one right in front of the box, then comes out, and then he hits a header on either side of the goalkeeper, and that's an even game. So it's just it kind of is what it is. It's just tough to swallow.
And I'm not going to kill him for being in the way on that play. He's where he's supposed to be inside the 6-yard box. The defender just tries to hit the looping header. It bounces off his leg. It's classic Lukaku. I mean, because if you could be rooted in the wrong spot, he'll be in the wrong spot. Like, that's ultimately the part about Lukaku that must just be so infuriating for basically any supporter who's ever watched him, except for like a month and a half of people who watched him on loan at West Brom, where he just ripped up the league, scored like 11 goals in 3.5 weeks. And I think Chelsea gave him like a third huge contract. He just is so frustrating because you see the player, like even that time where he like took the guy on, got him down the channel on his left foot and got it to his left foot and got the shot off, or even the strike with his right foot when he ran the channel. You can see why it works so well in Serie A. You can see why the Inter supporters really do love him and want him there. But you can also see why it's just never, ever going to work for this guy. Because I just don't think he has enough tactical skill. Like his actual skill level. Like what he does is use his body, use his weight. He's got a decent strike with his left peg. But that's really it, right? Like there's not really much else that he does other than create space. And you can't play to his feet. He's not going to run behind. And it's perfect playing in slow motion until you play against guys that are just tactically better than you. So for me, this is Pep winning it. I will say this. I'll give them credit. Their best player helped them win the Champions League. And I know normally that's when everyone would be like, what are you talking about, Chris? Kevin De Bruyne went off. Kevin De Bruyne hasn't been City's best player for 2 years. The best player at City is like City's best player in their position. The one player they have that unquestionably is the best in the world at what he does is Rodri. It's not even, to me, it's not even like a question mark. And I'd argue over the last month and a half, the second best player on the pitch for City has been John Stones. And this is where I think Pep deserves credit. This is scandalous. There are sanctions. There is blood money being spent. We all know they are cheating the system. But guess what? PSG's been cheating the system for a decade, and they have won shit. Real Madrid cheats the system. The only difference, right? Like, Real Madrid collects all the greatest players in the world. We call them Galacticos. City collects all the greatest players in the world with the highest payroll, and we say that they're a checkbook manager and they're killing football with money. Well, the truth is, this is just like the rich people in the town you grew up in. Like old money has no space for new money. So the real truth is, it's shady. They should be called out for their bullshit. But the manager clearly has done things with this group of talent. Because if you told me that John Stones would be a top 10 player in the Champions League, a top 5 player in a Champions League final, I'd tell you were crazy. But he was the best player for ever since he moved. And I just think that he deserves a lot of credit for that. And I think we don't give Pep enough credit at times for what he does with players on the pitch. He made Jack Grealish a new level player. I do believe he's making Haaland a better player. You saw it in the second half because the first half of the season, his movement was terrible. So I just think that while I'm not going to give him credit for how they constructed the squad when you spend the money you do and the shady deals and all that, I think it's ridiculous not to give them and him credit specifically for the actual improvements that we've seen in the players in that side.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think at this point, does he have the tendency to overthink his roster in big spots? Sure, but I think I would argue that he's been the best at squad management of any manager of the Premier League this season. You ran that stat back about the fact we always talk about how they're just loaded with depth. And then you run that stat back how he's used the fewest players all season. And it's just, yeah, you got to admire it. And you got to admire the fact that he is able, whether it's through obviously inflated wages or not, you got to admire the fact that he's got players that can start for any team in the world willing to take a bench spot and fight for a spot in that starting 11 because they know he's going to play the best man available. He's going to play the best man in the best form for what fits each match, regardless of he doesn't play favorites. And I think that sort of meritocracy is really sort of created an internal culture of competition within that squad that probably wasn't there for decades before they arrived. So, I mean, you say a thing with money, same thing with Newcastle. It helps to throw money at the problem, but at some point, both those managers, Eddie Howe and Pep, did some really nice things this year with that squad.
Yeah, Val News jumps in. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Pep is the greatest ever. He also came in and wanted to make sure that everyone knows you are so salty it's sad. I'm assuming you're talking to me. I'm Gally. That's the one. The one saying that Pep deserves all the credit for making all these players so much better and for actually coaching up players and being a tactical genius. So if that's salty, I guess, take those 115 allegations and, just figure out what to do with them. I'll put some salt on it for you. So we're going to go quickly. We got 2-3 minutes here, Paul. Real deal bullshit. Likely, you give me your chart, right? I'm going to toss out a few of these some of these transfers that are being rumored out there. And I'd love you to tell me if you think it's legit, not legit, or if you think it would be a bad fit for the player. So let's start with the news today that United will be officially making a bid for Mason Mount.
Very likely.
Yeah, unfortunately, I believe it's very likely too. And I do believe it will. I believe it will work. The players got to go and figure it out. But unfortunately, Ten Hag is putting something together there. If we're going to give Pep credit for what he's done with players on the pitch, we got to give Ten Hag some credit for what they did this year. I think he's putting a program together, and I think Mason Mount only strengthens that program. So I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but I do believe it will. Let's go to Declan Rice. And honestly, where do you see him ending up? Arsenal, Bayern, or City?
I think Arsenal makes the most sense in terms of both for the player. I think my only hesitation is whether West Ham is really interested in selling to a London rival. I know it's not the same as like Arsenal Tottenham, but it still is a London rivalry. In what kind of precedent that sets. I think Arsenal is still the one that makes the most sense to me, though.
So the rumors out there is that West Ham will make the move to Arsenal, but they're going to demand Emil Smith-Rowe come the other way, which would be an absolute coup for them if they could pull it off.
Yeah, that's smart.
I agree. I'll say this. I would love for him to go to Bayern because I think he slots into Bayern's midfield the way they play and the way the German league plays. Yep. And I think Declan Rice shows the world he is a lot better than an Irishman who decided he was English to play for the national team by going to Bayern, because I think Bayern's squad is in real trouble and needs real refreshing. And he would be great there. But English money. He goes to Arsenal. And unfortunately, I think he's good. And by good, I mean great. Harry Kane. Does he end up at United? Does he go to Real Madrid? Or does he just wallow another year at Spurs?
I honestly don't know. I have no idea. It makes literally no sense to me that he would continue his career at Tottenham. Like, I know that the English, he could go win a couple championships and come back and still probably get that record in England if he wanted it. So I don't know if it makes sense to stay at Tottenham for that goal record. I can't see him going to United just because I think United have a lot of needs still, and I think they need to acquire several players. And if they go for Harry, I think that's going to tie up most of those funds. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm in a weird one with this one here. A week ago,
Madrid.
Well, the Madrid makes the most sense with Benzema leaving. Yeah. He would fit in. I mean, let's be real. It doesn't matter where he goes, wherever he would go, he would be a bridled success, like a huge success. It doesn't matter what club he goes to, in my opinion. The hardest club for him will probably be United, because he's got to show up and play in front of Spurs supporters. He's got to go to Arsenal and get booed. Madrid makes the most sense outside of, having to go Gareth Bale and just do interviews. Like, could you imagine him trying to learn Spanish with mumbles, talking with his mouth full of water at all the press conferences? It would be absolutely outstanding. Here's the thing. Does anyone remember that Alan Shearer set the league record for most goals? The reason we remember it is because every time we turn the Premier League TV on, they talk about Harry Kane getting close to Alan Shearer's record. Nobody remembers he scored meaningless goals at Newcastle or scored some meaningless goals at the end of his career at United. They remember that he delivered a title at Blackpool. And for me, if Harry Kane wants to cement his legacy as arguably the most talented, if not one of the greatest English footballers to ever play the game, I think taking his talents overseas, like some of the other great players have done before him, and winning big trophies. And I think going to Madrid, reclaiming the La Liga crown, and maybe putting a Champions League medal on his mantelpiece, arguably could make him the greatest English player of all time, let alone if he could find silverware with the national team. He's already captained a team that started a World Cup final, got to a World Cup semi, a World Cup quarter, and a Euro final. Like, Harry Kane's doing okay. He's going to go down as the greatest English goal scorer. For me, it's not even about the money. It's about whether or not he can get out. And it'll be interesting to see. We're going to go a little bit over here, but that's okay. The news today broke that Mbappe is not re-signing his contract at PSG, and he actually is leaving at the end of next season. Now, I have heard this 50 other times, and then a Brinks truck of billions of dollars rolls up. But this does feel different for the plain fact that he sent the letter to the French media before he sent it to the representatives at Paris Saint-Germain, which makes me think this was calculated to try to edge towards a move this summer. Do you think one, we know Mbappe listens to this program. Do you think he believes Kane might be going to Madrid and wants to make sure if they're about to spend that money, they make sure and spend it in the right direction?
I was just going to say how poor fucking Harry Kane gets 2 deals, one to City and one to Real Madrid, hijacked by Erling Haaland and Mbappe as 2 of the biggest cock blocks in the history of football. Just unreal, man.
It's unreal. It's unreal. Do you think he moves? Do you honestly believe he'll move? And honestly, Paul, and I'm serious about this question. Do you actually fucking care? Because I honestly could never see Mbappe play again. And I know it would hurt missing out on the greatness that is the player. But I don't even remember the joy and fun I had watching the young kid with the great smile at Monaco score goals in the Champions League for fun. Because he's miserable to watch at PSG. He's miserable to watch for France. And I find myself wondering whether or not Neymar is more likable.
Yeah, I absolutely do not care. I do not care because it really doesn't affect the Premier League. I mean, maybe it has trickle down effect, and you could argue that. I also think that we suffer from Mbappe fatigue. We do this every fucking year, and we've done it for so long that nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with you more, or couldn't agree with you more. So let's kind of wrap it up with this. A quick conversation here, a minute or two on the players being rumored to the Saudi League. Obviously, we know that Ronaldo moved in the winter. Karim Benzema has made the move. There are rumblings that Hugo Lloris is up for big wages, that it could be where Eden Hazard ends up if he decides to look for another contract. And now today reports that the N'Golo Kante move is moving to a physical and a medical. So that's just about done. And now we have links to Neymar, Icardi, and one Bobby Firmino. This is just the beginning, right?
Bobby. Not Bobby.
This This is just the beginning, though, right, Paul? Like, this isn't.
It's got to be. It'll be the
end.
Chinese League, like 2014 Chinese League, and I don't know. I want to keep Bobby out of the conversation because I wanted to make the joke. It's all players I don't want to talk about anyway, so it's great.
Fair. he was rumored today, so I had to put him on there for being fair. And ultimately, when these monies come in, do you believe, like in the Chinese League, we knew it was short term. They were trying to buy the ability to get in and then realize quickly we can't do this, and they just moved off of it. Do you believe that we're going to start seeing these like João Moutinhos, like guys at the end of their careers, guys in the middle to end of their careers, just going there and taking one more payday, Cesc Fabregas style, Santi Cazorla style, instead of going back to their boyhood clubs, instead of going and playing in Uruguay, they're just going to go there and take £300,000-400,000 a week?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Why not? And I mean, especially with that infrastructure over there, it has the ability to be sustainable for a while. And I think probably the Saudis in the back of their mind would want not only for that to happen to raise the sort of bar in that league, but I think that they want to seriously consider the longevity of making that one of the Power 5 leagues in the future down the line. I think there's probably a long-term plan outside of just the ability to get these players now.
I question whether the plan isn't about showing the strength of power of the dollar, so that their money will be taken more seriously in the higher European leagues. Brian Shelton was taking where I was going with this. He said this is LIV or Live Part 2. For those who don't follow, Live is the Saudi funded alternate golf league, which, as most people that follow sports here in America know, the PGA Tour went, head over tea kettle, basically ass over tea kettle, embarrassing themselves, trotting out, everyone from survivors of 9/11 saying that, literally these are you're supporting these folks and supporting this golf league, and then went ahead and merged with them as soon as they realized they couldn't win. And the real secret to all of this is the merger only happened because they got word from their lawyers they were going to lose their antitrust exemption, and they were going to lose their fight with the American government over not paying taxes on their monopoly. So they were like, shit, we better let this money in. I wonder if that's not what this is. Like, a lot of people believe they didn't care about starting an alternate tour. They wanted to buy the PGA Tour. And within the next 5 years, they're going to own the controlling rights to the PGA Tour and run it their way with their money. And then they'll shut down Live because they don't care. And I wonder if this isn't their way of getting more of their money spread out into the major leagues across all of Europe. Because as soon as Germany sees their best players going to Saudi Arabia, all of a sudden the German league is going to figure out a way to bring in to bring in Saudi ownership into the Bundesliga. Because to me, this feels like their way of getting into to owning more of Europeans' elite football clubs. And we see what's happening in England with how they're trying to combat Newcastle. They're making it more difficult for bids to come in from the Saudis for Manchester United. We heard the same thing when Liverpool was supposedly up for sale. So it'll be interesting there. So we will end this with a Liverpool tie. Are you shocked at the news that Steven Gerrard has accepted the position to be a head coach in the Saudi League?
Yep, I am. I absolutely am. I don't know, man. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, I didn't see it coming either. The only thing it makes me think is one, that money is really, really good. And two, his time at Aston Villa really, really hurt him to the point where he has to take a job. He was rumored to the Poland job, then they didn't offer it to him. He was rumored to the Olympiacos job. He was rumored to be a finalist at Leicester. And then Leicester came out and were like, yeah, we're not bringing a guy in who failed in the Midlands, thanks. We've got one of those. Like, we're not bringing a guy in that used to manage Villa to manage Leicester. Like, it shocks me. I think it really hurts him, in my opinion. And it kind of hurts his aura. And I think everything he built at Rangers kind of got undone by taking a job too big for him at Villa. I really hope this works for him, because if this doesn't work, he may find himself with like only the option of being a pundit. And I'd argue he's worse at being a pundit than he is at being a football manager because his personality is zero bueno. So I really hope this works for him. I don't love the look. I want to see a heck of a lot less of it. But I wish him all the best. So we went over a little bit here. Paul, great time as always. Please, as always, everyone, go to the YouTube page. The link is up in the comments. Like it, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment if you'd like to get involved. You'd like to be part of the upcoming season, entertain, being on a podcast, doing some writing. Send us a message. We're always looking for new contributors. Any parting shots, Mr. Bickler?
No, man, just about to walk my ass over to Tim's pool and get in there.
Good idea. We know he won't be at the beach. He'll have one of them $9 rafts streaming on through. He's probably, knowing him and his dedication, listening to this program right now, critiquing us, criticizing the way that I've hosted. If you are, you can keep all your comments to yourself. But in all seriousness, I believe Tim will be back next week. We will be back with our normal show. We are going to do some follow-up Premier League shows to our terrible opening season predictions. We'll get some of those pre-recorded clips out there, and we'll see exactly how bad we all did. So for all of us here at American Scouser TV, thank you as always for listening. This is Gally and Paul. We will see you later. We will avoid some of that unnecessary pet drama.